people are aware of the future in ways that animals aren't, or animals are only partially aware. We're very aware of the future and aware of our mortal limitations in a manner that seems unique to human beings. And we constantly sacrifice the present to the future. That's actually the definition of work. And that emerges very early on in the biblical narrative corpus, the idea that humans are destined to work, but that also work is the sacrifice of the present. And that's part of the fall in some sense. It's the sacrifice of the present to the future. And we regard that as the hallmark of maturity, fundamentally, right? Can you delay gratification? Well, if the answer is no, it's, well, then you're 2. Can you delay gratification? Well, then, I mean that technically, because 2-year-olds can't delay gratification, which makes it very difficult for other people to play with them, for example. If you can delay gratification, then you can work. If you can work, then you're mature. It's the definition of maturity and responsibility. And it does pervade. It's so interesting to see that it pervades the active attention itself, and that there's no, because I used to ask my students, because I was trying to figure this out, I'd ask them a question like, well, why are you writing this essay? Or what are you doing when you're writing this essay? That's a better question. So you think, what is someone doing when writing an essay? And one answer is, say they're doing it on a computer. Well, they're moving their fingers up and down. And that's actually a really good answer, because that's not an idea, right? Moving your fingers up and down, that's not an idea. That's where your spirit meets your body. You're actually moving something physical. And you don't really have consciousness of the musculature, or you don't know how you move your fingers, but you can do it. And so at the highest level of resolution, when you're writing an essay, you're moving your fingers. And now you know how to type, and you have automated structures for doing that. And then you're composing words, and the words are in phrases, and the phrases are in sentences, and the sentences are in paragraphs, and the paragraphs are in sections, and the whole thing makes an essay. But then that's a subset of a class, and you want to grade for the class because you want to pass the class, because you want to get your degree. But why do you want to get your degree? It's, well, maybe you're interested in that field of study, and you think being a scholar is a good thing, and you want to have a job. And so while you're writing an essay, what are you doing? Preparing to have your career? And then are you doing that because you want to be a good citizen and a good father, perhaps a good mother? And do you want to do that because you want to be a good person? Or are you mixed up in all of that? So you're doing all of those things well or badly at the same time, all the time, with everything you do, all the time. And there's no way around that. It can't be simplified. The whole structure has to be there. And that's another reason why we don't have general purpose robots yet, is that they're just not embedded in that ethic that stretches all the way up from the most minute motor patterns of action and perception to the highest possible ethical striving.
You realize that in order to exist in the world, you're constantly having to sacrifice. That is, you have to sacrifice the idiosyncrasies in order to be able to grasp the object, because this can be all kinds of things, right? It could be a dog's chew toy, it could be a million things. But in order to be able to grasp it, I have to sacrifice the idiosyncrasies. And I also have to somehow, let's say, recognize it in its highest form, or kind of move it towards its highest form. And that seems to be an aspect of religious thinking, which is actually part of attention, which is sacrifice.
Well, the sacrificial aspect of attention in part is that whenever you see something as that thing, you sacrifice the possibility of all the other things it could be. And that's delimiting to a large degree. It hems you in, but that's also a relief, because how many bloody million things do you want to attend to at one time? But so part of the reason, the idea of sacrifice, conscious idea of sacrifice, emerges very early on, for example, in the biblical writings, because the second story in Genesis, I think it's Genesis 3, is that the Cain and Abel story? Is Genesis 3 or 2?
After Genesis 3, Genesis 4, I guess.
4, okay, so it's very early on, and there's this insistence that, so human beings are already destined to work as a consequence of the fall out of the Garden of Eden. But the Cain and Abel story is specifically about sacrifice, and about the degree to which a sacrifice has to be of the highest quality. So you have this one protagonist, Abel, who's a prototype for a mode of being that stretches throughout history. And Abel's sacrifices are to the highest to that which is the highest imaginable. So he's aiming as high as he can. And they're genuine and honest. And the consequence of that is that God smiles upon him, let's say, but that his life is extremely successful. He gets everything that a sensible human being would want and need. And he's contrasted with Cain, who's bitter and arrogant and makes second-rate sacrifices. And you want to think about that personally. It's like, well, did you give it your best shot when you failed? And if the answer is no, it's like, well, who are you trying to fool exactly? You trying to fool yourself? Well, good luck with that. You trying to fool other people? It's like, well, who made you so smart and them so dumb? And is that how you think about other people? You can just pull the wool over their eyes? And then is it more than that? Do you think you can bend the structure of reality? And so you're going to make these half-witted sacrifices and that's going to please God too? And that's what you believe? And Cain is very annoyed that his sacrifices aren't being rewarded, and he goes and talks to God and basically calls him out and says something like, kind of stupid cosmos did you make here? Here I am breaking myself in half and all the good things are going to Abel. It's like, what's up with you? Which is really quite the thing to do, And if you don't think people do that, you don't know much about them. And God basically tells them, well, people do that all the time, which is why it's an archetypal story. And God basically tells Cain that he doesn't make good sacrifices. He knows that perfectly well, that he was tempted by bitterness and arrogance and deceit to enter into a consensual sexual relationship with the spirit of vengeful sin itself, which is a hell of an accusation.
Think of a basketball player. I like to always bring it to something that at first not religious at all for people to see what we're talking about. The basketball player has to sacrifice a million things that all his friends are doing that are fun or that he could be doing. He has to take away all the idiosyncrasies and focus on one thing. And then that's when the Abel sacrifice comes in. He has to give his best. If he doesn't give his best, then he won't make it. There's no way. And so the sacrificial pattern enters into pretty much any type of excellence or excellent behavior.
I'm grateful, oh yeah, able, oh yeah, I'm stable, oh yeah, no label, oh yeah, you know me, only.
One of the things we did was imitate the predator, and so we were in awe of a predatory animal, like we still might be if you meet a grizzly bear in the woods. You might freeze, and you're certainly going to attend to it.
So I gotta
but then
get through it.
There's part
and
of you
the only
that
thing I
is
know
deeply
is to
called
love what
upon
I'm
to
doing.
imitate
Never give up, never slow till I finally
capacity for
never
aggression
listen
of the
to the
predator,
nose.
so
I
that
just
you can
wanna keep
defend
moving, keep my head up
your
when
loved
I
ones
act.
against
Head up, that's
predatory
a
action.
fact.
And some of that would be to be the warrior that can fight off the grizzly bear, but then abstracted up into the religious sense, it would be to be the ethical actor who can protect your family from unscrupulous psychopaths, forces of malevolence that border on the satanic. And that's all part of the ethical enterprise. And weirdly enough, all of your acts of perception are necessarily nested inside a structure that's pointing to what's at the highest, or you're incoherent. Those are the options. Well, that's a strange thing, right? Because you can say, well, maybe your hierarchy of value isn't unified and there's nothing to draw off. It's like, okay, it's not unified. Well, then you're confused. And if you're with someone and your hierarchies of value aren't unified, then you are in conflict. Or you're aimless, or you're hopeless, or you're anxious, or you're lost. That's the phenomenological consequence of lacking this united pyramidal ethic. So you can't get away from the necessity of this unless you go, aimless, nihilistic, confused, hopeless, all of that.